So, in a big step towards concluding a story that's been going on for about 6 months, Gable Steveson, who was the third place wrestler at NCAA's last year as a freshman, as a true freshman at that, he has been kind of in legal limbo for the last 6 months due to a sexual misconduct allegation. He's finally been cleared of that, and by cleared, he wasn't charged. So it's not as though he was charged, went to court, they reviewed the. Well, that's not to say that he's guilty. The point is, it's not as though he went through the full court process. They just found from the get go there just wasn't enough evidence to charge him and actually move forward with it. So not to make it sound like he got away with something here that he shouldn't have. As far as what I've seen, there's no reason to believe that's the case. But to go to the story, it says Gable Steveson and Dylan Martinez, who's one of his teammates, will not be charged for the crimes they were arrested for back in June, according to the Star Tribune, which is Minnesota's local newspaper. Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman said Friday in a news conference that there was inadequate evidence to prosecute the case. Steveson and Martinez were arrested in June for suspicion of criminal sexual conduct. They were released from jail pending the investigation, which now appears to have been conducted with no charges being filed against either student athlete. Steveson had been practicing with the team, but had not been able to compete with the team per the policy of the University of Minnesota. Since he's no longer under investigation, he can now presumably return to varsity action in the second semester. He put out a tweet saying, "I'm back. Let's go get it," or let's get to it. And it says alternatively he could remain on redshirt as he competed last year as a true freshman. And the idea there would be that he's going to have a shot at an Olympic spot for the team this year, so he can just focus primarily on freestyle wrestling at this point. Don't worry about folk style, and see if he can't make the U.S. team, which is currently the spot's currently held by Nick Wisdowski, who Stevenson wasn't able to get past to make the team in 2019. But he's definitely looking to make the team in 2020. So for him, he'll have a decision to make whether or not he wants to jump back into the NCAA, where he's pretty much going to be sort of like a 1B favorite along with Anthony Cassar. Last year, there was sort of this. There's like this triangle of people where it was Anthony Cassar, Derek White, and Gable Steveson, and at least it had seemed prior to the NCAA finals that Cassar would beat Steveson would beat White, and then White would beat Cassar. But Cassar was able to beat Steveson in the semifinals, and then was able to avenge his loss and beat Derek White. Derek White's not in the mix this year, so right now it looks as though if Steveson and Cassar are both in it, that they'll likely be 1 and 2, that they'd be favored to win their halves of the bracket and meet each other in the finals. At which point, it'd be interesting to see how that match would go, because in both matches, Steveson appeared to be in a position where he could get the win, but then as the match would go along, he'd sort of fade off, and Cassar would be able to win it late. So it'd be interesting to see if there would be some tactical changes or any technical improvements from Steveson over the course of the last year that would make for a different result there. So if he does return to NCAA wrestling, that's great. That's probably what most fans would like to see. If not, then at least this takes it off of his back. As far as the university policy for Minnesota, effectively what you have here is that he was being held up for 6 months for something that he didn't do, or for something that there was insufficient evidence that he did. And he was effectively suspended 2 months for something he probably didn't do. Is that a fair policy? That's where it gets a little bit tricky. And you're sort of hearing this right now in the MMA space, where there are some journalists who are trying to make an issue about Conor McGregor fighting on January 18th, saying that he has a couple of pending charges that are in similar nature here, and that he should be held up until those get cleared. When they do get cleared, you feel like there's a bit of an injustice done, where the guy who was being held up for something he didn't do really shouldn't have been held up that way. Do I think that universities should allow wrestlers who are facing charges to compete while the charges get processed? I mean, I think in this case, you kind of feel like there's a no harm, no foul type of thing, where you got a guy who could potentially redshirt this year if he wants to, a guy who can still finish out the season and take his most important matches if he wants to. But with that being said, you can definitely have worse situations come out of this, and you'd like to see something in place where someone who's innocent isn't being dragged along by a slow legal system and is being punished for something they didn't do. And I don't know that Gable Steveson was done right here by the university. And if you're wondering for more specifics on the actual charge, here's an article from back when the initial charges came about. So this is from June 17th from the New York Post. It says college wrestlers accused of penetrating victim with object. So I guess that's the specific charge they had. So this is the top wrestler at the University of Minnesota, which is Gable, and his teammate, which is Dylan Martinez, had been arrested back in June So then it's just talking about him and Martinez and what their background was. They're saying a victim told police they were penetrated with an object, so that's vague, but then also not so vague, I guess. It says the unidentified victim went to a hospital for treatment, but police had not released additional details of the assault. Police spokesman told the Post that those details were not being made public as of Monday. The wrestlers had not yet been charged. One of their attorneys told the Post that Steveson is cooperating with investigators. So it's not exactly clear what to make of this. You would probably make the assumption that him and Martinez were probably with a girl, and the girl was getting penetrated. I don't know. This is, I guess, in theory, with the vagueness here, it could almost be a hazing thing as well. That's a possibility. I don't know if that's exactly what happened there, but whatever the case may be, Steveson wasn't charged. So one of the downsides that happens here is when someone does get accused of sexual misconduct, specifically something like this, where it's like a sexual assault, even if they're innocent, people still will tie that charge to them as if it was something that they did. So I guess for your own right, if you hear about Gable Steveson, someone's like, "Hey, isn't that that rapist?" At least now you know, like, this is like the actual facts behind the story, and he was cleared, and insufficient evidence was found. So I would not put that scarlet letter over his head. So hopefully he decides to come back this year. I actually would prefer to see him go the NCAA route rather than redshirting. If he does redshirt, then I mean he still has 3 more years of eligibility. So it would seem as though we're still going to get 4 full seasons or 4 NCAA tournaments out of Gable Steveson before all is said and done. So it will remain to be seen whether or not 2020 is going to be one of them. But it's going to be up to him to determine how he wants to handle this. I don't know how hard he's been training in the meantime as these charges have been getting sorted out. If he feels like he can jump in right now and win a national title, where he feels his freestyle skills are relative to folk style. So that remains to be seen, but this is still a big development for here, and it definitely clears the way for him to return this year if he wants to.